I hated him. Those three words tell you everything you need to know about Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was not a man who played games. When Austin stepped into the ring, he was there to fight. When he looked at another wrestler, he saw them for what they really were. And sometimes, what he saw made his blood boil. Stone Cold Steve Austin was one of the biggest stars wrestling has ever seen. He was the guy who saved the WWF during the Monday Night Wars. He was the rebel who stood up to his boss and became a legend doing it. Austin wore black boots, talked trash, and stunned anyone who got in his way. Kids loved him, adults loved him, even people who hated wrestling knew who Stone Cold was. He became more than just a wrestler, he became a cultural icon. His face was on t-shirts everywhere. His catchphrases were repeated in schoolyards across America. Stone Cold was not just famous, he was unstoppable. But behind the scenes, Austin was not friends with everyone. In fact, there were some wrestlers he could not stand, some he refused to work with, some he thought were fake, some he believed were hurting the business he loved. These were not just little arguments. These were real problems that changed the course of wrestling history. One of these feuds was so bad that it never even made it to TV. Austin said no, and that was the end of it. Today, we are going to talk about 6 wrestlers Stone Cold Steve Austin hated. Some of these names will surprise you. Some of them you already know about, but all of them show you what kind of man Austin really was. He did not care about being polite. He cared about being the best. And if you got in the way of that, you were going to hear about it. Let's start with the guy Austin hated the most. Jeff Jarrett is the one wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin flat out refused to work with. This was not a disagreement about money. This was not about a storyline. This was pure hatred. Austin thought Jarrett was not good enough to share a ring with him, and he made sure everyone knew it. The problems started back in Memphis. Before either man was a big star, Austin and Jarrett worked together in a small wrestling company. Even back then, Austin thought Jarrett was sloppy. There was one story that really stuck with Austin. Jarrett wore these long tights with tassels hanging off them. Every time Austin tried to do a head scissor move, the tassels would fall into his mouth. It sounds like a small thing, but to Austin, it was a sign. It showed that Jarrett did not care enough about his craft. He did not pay attention to the details. And in wrestling, details matter. When you are trying to make something look real, every little thing counts. Those tassels ruined the illusion for Austin. They reminded him that Jarrett was not serious about being the best. Years later, Jarrett returned to the WWF in 1997. By this time, Austin was becoming a huge star. The company wanted to book a feud between Austin and Jarrett. It would have been a big deal, but Austin said no. He refused to do it. He told the bosses that he would not wrestle Jarrett. He did not think Jarrett was worth his time. Austin had worked too hard to get to the top. He was not going to waste his momentum on someone he did not believe in. Things got even worse when Jarrett supposedly criticized Austin's famous catchphrase, Austin 316. Jarrett thought it was disrespectful to religion. He called it blasphemy. For Austin, that was the final straw. Austin's whole character was about being anti-authority and speaking his mind. If Jarrett could not understand that, then they had nothing to talk about. Austin had enough power to kill the feud before it started. The company listened to him. Jarrett never got his match with Stone Cold. Austin did not care if it hurt Jarrett's career. He was not going to damage his own reputation by working with someone he did not respect. To Austin, wrestling was about being real, and Jarrett was not real enough. Hulk Hogan is one of the most famous wrestlers of all time. He was the face of wrestling in the 1980s. He was a hero to millions of kids, but Stone Cold Steve Austin wanted nothing to do with him. In 2002, WE planned a huge match for WrestleMania 18. The plan was for Austin to face Hogan. It would have been a dream match. Two of the biggest stars in wrestling history going head-to-head. Fans would have loved it. The company would have made a ton of money. But Austin said no. Instead, The Rock fought Hogan, and it became one of the most famous matches ever. Austin gave up millions of dollars because he did not want to work with Hogan. Why did Austin refuse? He gave 2 reasons. First, he honestly believed the match would be bad. Austin said their styles did not fit together. Hogan's matches followed the same pattern every time. He would get beat up, then suddenly Hulk up, shake off the pain, and win. It was theatrical. It was over the top. Austin's style was the opposite. He brawled. He fought dirty. He made everything look real and gritty. Austin knew that if they tried to wrestle each other, it would look like a mess. He did not want to ruin his reputation with a bad match on the biggest stage of the year. But there was a deeper reason. reason. Austin did not trust Hogan. Back in the 1990s, Austin worked for WCW, a rival wrestling company. Hogan was the top star there. Austin believed that Hogan used his backstage power to keep other wrestlers down. Austin felt like Hogan and his friends made sure he never got a real chance to shine. Austin was released from W and had to start over in the WWF. He never forgot that. That experience shaped everything Austin did after. He swore he would never let anyone have that kind of power over him again. Austin was afraid that if he agreed to wrestle Hogan, Hogan would try to change the finish of the match at the last second. He called it Hogan's voodoo politicking magic. Austin thought Hogan might convince Vince McMahon to let him win. Instead of following the plan, Austin was not going to take that risk. He had been burned before, and he was not going to let it happen again. The Rock ended up taking the match, and it worked out great. The Rock's style was more theatrical, just like Hogan's. They clicked in a way Austin and Hogan never could have. Austin was right to say no. He protected his legacy and avoided a disaster. But it showed that Austin would turn down a fortune if it meant keeping control of his career. Stone Cold Steve Austin's feud with Brock Lesnar never happened. But it is one of the most famous stories in wrestling history. In 2002, Austin walked out of the WWE. He went home in the middle of the biggest run of his career. It shocked everyone, and it all started because of Brock Lesnar. Lesnar was a new wrestler. He was young, strong, and talented. The company saw him as the future. We wanted to push Lesnar to the top as fast as possible, so they came up with a plan. They wanted Austin to lose to Lesnar on an episode of Monday Night Raw. It would be a huge moment. Lesnar would beat a Stone Cold, and it would make him a star overnight. But Austin said no. He refused to show up. He drove home to San Antonio without telling anyone. The company was furious. Vince McMahon went on TV and said Austin was no longer part of the roster. Jim Ross, the announcer, called Austin's decision personal and unprofessional. Fans were confused. Why would Austin refuse to help a young star? Years later, Austin explained himself. He said the problem was not about losing to Lesnar. Austin was willing to lose, but he believed the match needed to be built up first. You do not just throw together a match between Stone Cold and a rising star on free TV. That is a pay-per-view match. That is a match you promote for weeks. That is a match people should have to pay to see by giving it away on Raw without any build-up. We was wasting a huge opportunity. They were throwing away money. Austin saw it as disrespectful to everyone involved. It cheapened what both men had worked for. Austin believed that moments like this needed to be treated with respect. Wrestling is about building drama. You create tension. You make people want to see the match. Then when they finally get it, they are excited by rushing the match and putting it on TV with no warning. We was disrespecting both Austin and Lesnar. It would hurt Austin's legacy, and it would not help Lesnar as much as it could have. Vince McMahon later said that Austin was the toughest man to work with, but even Brock Lesnar admitted years later that Austin was right. Lesnar said he understood business. Austin was fighting for something bigger than himself. He was fighting to protect the way wrestling should be done, and he was willing to walk away from everything to prove his point. Stone Cold Steve Austin's feud with Vince McMahon is the most famous storyline in wrestling history. Every week, Austin would show up and make McMahon's life miserable. He would stun him, pour beer on him, and drive trucks into the arena. Fans loved every second of it. But what people did not always realize was that some of the hatred was real. Vince McMahon was Austin's boss. He was the owner of the WWE. He controlled everything. And Austin did not like being controlled. Austin wanted to have a say in his storylines. He wanted to protect his character. He wanted to make sure he was not being used in the wrong way. McMahon, on the other hand, wanted total control. He was used to wrestlers doing what they were told. But Austin was not like other wrestlers. The two men clashed all the time. Sometimes it was about creative decisions. Sometimes it was about money. Sometimes it was just about respect. McMahon later admitted that Austin was the toughest person he ever worked with, but he also knew that Austin was making him rich. The Austin versus. McMahon's storyline was the reason WWE beat WCW in the ratings war. It was the reason WWE became the biggest wrestling company in the world. The storyline worked because the tension between them was real. When Austin stunned McMahon on TV, there was a part of him that really wanted to do it. When McMahon yelled at Austin, there was a part of him that was really frustrated. They turned their real-life battles into entertainment, and it made both of them legends. But it was not always easy. The 2002 walkout put a huge strain on their relationship. McMahon felt betrayed. He had given Austin everything, and Austin walked out on him. It took time for them to rebuild trust. Even years later, you could tell there was still tension between them, but that tension was also what made their partnership so special. They pushed each other, they challenged each other, and together they created something unforgettable. The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin were the two biggest stars of the Attitude Era. They main evented WrestleMania 3 times. They had some of the best matches in WWE history. Fans still debate who was better, but behind the scenes, things were not always smooth. Austin and The Rock respected each other. They knew they needed each other to be great, but they were also competitors. They both wanted to be number one, they both wanted the spotlight, and sometimes their egos got in the way. One story sums it up perfectly. Years after both men had retired, WWE was planning a segment for WrestleMania 30. Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and Stone Cold were all going to appear together. Austin was told he would be the last one to walk out to the ring. That was important. Being last meant you were the biggest star. But when Austin showed up, he found out that The Rock had been told the same thing. Both men thought they would be last. It caused tension. Austin was not happy. He felt like he had been lied to. There were other issues too. The Rock became a huge movie star. He started traveling on private jets. He stopped hanging out with the other wrestlers. Some people in the locker room thought The Rock was acting like he was too good for them. Austin never said it directly, but you could tell he was not thrilled about it. Austin was a wrestler. The Rock was becoming something else, but despite the ego battles, Austin and The Rock delivered every time they stepped into the ring together. They understood that their rivalry was good for business. They knew that fans wanted to see them fight, so they put their personal feelings aside and gave the people what they wanted. Their matches were brutal, dramatic, and unforgettable. And even if they did not always get along, they made each other better. Stone Cold Steve Austin's feud with Bret Hart was different from the others. This was not about hatred. This was not about backstage politics. This was about two of the best wrestlers in the world pushing each other to be even better. Their feud started in 1996 and reached its peak at WrestleMania 13 in 1997. That match changed Austin's career. It was a submission match, and it ended with Austin passing out in Bret Hart's finishing move, the sharpshooter. Austin refused to give up. Blood poured down his face. He fought until he could not fight anymore. It was one of the most iconic images in wrestling history, and it made Austin a superstar. Austin has always given Bret Hart credit for that. He said that Bret put me on the map big time. Bret was a veteran. He had been a champion for years. He could have made Austin look bad. Instead, he made Austin look like a warrior. Bret's decision to have Austin pass out instead of tapping out was a genius move. It protected Austin's character while still giving Bret the win. It was the kind of thing only a true professional would do. There were times when Austin and Bret did not see eye to eye. They had different opinions about how wrestling should be done. Bret was a technical wrestler who believed in perfect execution. Austin was a brawler who believed in emotion and intensity, but they both cared deeply about the business. They both wanted to tell the best stories possible, and that mutual respect made their feud so powerful. When they fought, you believed it was real. You felt every punch, every submission hold, every drop of sweat. It was wrestling at its finest. Bret Hart represents the kind of opponent Austin wanted. Someone who took the craft seriously, someone who was willing to sacrifice for the greater good, someone who understood that wrestling was not just about winning or losing, it was about creating moments that fans would never forget. Austin and Bret did that, and their feud will be remembered forever. Stone Cold Steve Austin made enemies. There is no doubt about that, but he made them for a reason. He refused to work with people he did not respect. He walked out when he thought the company was making a mistake. He fought his boss for creative control. He turned down millions of dollars to protect his legacy. Some people thought Austin was difficult. Some people thought he was selfish. But Austin saw it differently. He believed that if he did not stand up for himself, no one else would. He believed that wrestling deserved to be treated with respect, and he believed that the fans deserved the best possible product. Every time Austin made a stand, he was thinking about the bigger picture. He was thinking about what wrestling should be. Austin's walkout in 2002 set a precedent. It showed that top stars could say no. It showed that wrestlers did not have to accept every decision the company made. It changed the balance of power in wrestling. And even though it cost Austin in the short term, it helped him in the long run. When he came back, he was still one of the biggest stars in the world, and he had proven that he was willing to sacrifice everything to protect what he believed in. So which feud was the most brutal? Was it Jeff Jarrett, the man Austin refused to even look at? Was it Hulk Hogan, the dream match that never happened? Was it Brock Lesnar, the walkout that shocked the world? Or was it Vince McMahon, the boss Austin fought every single day? The truth is, they were all brutal in their own way. Each one showed a different side of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Each one revealed what he valued and what he was willing to fight for, and each one helped make him the legend he is today. Austin may have hated a few people along the way, but fans loved him for it, because when Stone Cold stepped into that ring, you knew he was giving you everything he had. He never took shortcuts. He never settled for less than the best. And that is why, even today, when you hear that glass shatter and the crowd erupts, you know you are watching something special. Which feud do you think was the most brutal? Drop your thoughts in the comments.